afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me for our virtual wine tasting series on Riesling. I'm super excited about today, especially. This is our fourth month of tasting, but Riesling definitely is my favorite varietal, and it's so versatile and there's so many amazing examples. It was very hard to pick today, but I tried to pick a great representation of different styles. So hopefully you already received and we're able to find the wines we're trying today. We are going to start with a sparkling wine. We'll have a table version of a dry Riesling, and then we'll end with a late harvest Riesling today and some sweetness. So we have all different kinds of styles and different regions around the state to try from. So the first wine we're trying today, and for those of you that are new, I should probably have introduced myself. So I am Julie Purpura Hosbach. I am the Education and Member Services Manager at the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. I am a certified sommelier through the Court of Master Sommeliers, Wine Spirit and Education Trust Level 3 certified, and a certified wine specialist through the Society of Wine Educators, which basically means I'm a huge wine nerd, and I love talking about wine and wine tastings and wine appreciation, and particularly I love appreciating and being a proponent of New York State wines because there's so many great wines. So the New York Wine and Grape Foundation offers many benefits to its consumer members, one of which is access to this wine tasting series, among discounts to VIP events and special events across the state, a welcome package, and more. So if you're interested in becoming a consumer member, please send me an email or you can ask questions. If you've not used Zoom before, at the bottom, maybe at the top, there's a toolbar of your screen in Zoom, and there's a Q&A feature, so feel free to use that to ask questions at any time. There's actually also a chat bar feature, and you can type your comments and thoughts in there. So don't be shy. There's no wrong or stupid questions when wine appreciation. Some of you I know are more practiced in this if you've been joining me for every session, but if you're new, it's never too late to start and get into trying and tasting and appreciating wines. Again, don't be shy. When I say, what do you smell? What do you see? What do you taste? What do you think? Please feel free to add your comments into the Q&A or chat bar features. We'll talk about them, comment. We're going to run through these three Rieslings. We'll talk and appreciate them. I'll add some notes about just general Riesling winemaking and wine production in general. And it should be a good time. So let's dive right in. The first wine we're going to have today, and I waited to pour so that we could see its beautiful bubbles, is Living Roots Wine and Company 2016 Sparkling Riesling. So Riesling, as I told you, is not only my favorite varietal, but it's an amazing, versatile grape that can be produced in many different styles. So from dry to off dry, medium sweet, sweet versions can be late harvest wines, ice wines. There's so many different styles, and it can also be used to make sparkling wine. So this is an exciting example of sparkling wine. 2016 was an awesome vintage in the Finger Lakes region. Living Roots Wine and Company is an urban winery in Rochester, New York. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely go visit them. Remember, when we're appreciating wine, when we look at it, it's best to look at a 45-degree angle against a white backdrop with optimal lighting. And when we did our sparkling wine tasting, if you remember, we want to look at the bubbles in a sparkling glass. We also talked about in the sparkling wine tasting using a flute versus a regular glass. There's quite the debate on what from winemakers and sommeliers across the world on what's more appropriate or better for you to appreciate. And in our own little sparkling tasting, if you recall, we decided that you actually can get more aromatics out of a normal glass. Flute's awesome for celebrating, and it gives us that sense of celebration, but I'm gonna stick with using this for optimal, getting its optimal aroma out of it. So the bubbles in a sparkling wine should carry the aromas right up to the top of the glass for you to smell. And again, first we should be looking at our glass and see that there is a little bit of golden hue. This is a 2016 vintage. So sparkling wines sometimes don't have a vintage, but this is from the 2016 vintage, which was a warm, hot summer in this area. And we do see a nice golden hue to this. It's definitely got, 3 years age. It also had a little bit of time in oak, and we see those effervescent bubbles. It is made in the traditional method, so there was lots of lees contact. So let's see if we smell that in the nose. What do you get in the nose? I definitely get apple, citrus, a little bit of floral, maybe some like tree fruit, orange blossoms. And again, because of that traditional method, we should be getting a yeasty character, whether you get that like fresh bread dough or whether it's more like a toast. And you even get a little bit of that, mineral-driven hint of petrol that is so common with the Riesling grape. So often when I lead tastings and we're talking about Riesling and I say I smell petrol, people are like, isn't that a bad thing? But no, in Riesling, it's actually a very appreciated, common characteristic of Riesling. So it's generally a sign of a well, made and totally a common descriptor for Riesling. All right, anything else you smell? Seeing a lot of citrus, fruit, that dough character. If you have your tasting sheet that I sent you ahead of time and you want to take notes, take a minute to fill them in. All right, go ahead and taste it. Have it go around your whole mouth. I'm just making a few notes. So we had lots of little bubbles, all that fun in your mouth, right? Little bubbles scrubbing your tongue. Again, for those of you, the veterans of our virtual wine tasting, when we are tasting a wine, we're looking for those structural elements. So acidity, if it's a pink, red, or a wine that has a lot of oak, we're talking about tannins, but generally not as much with white wines. We're going to talk about the residual sugar level. So the sweetness level or absence of that, dry, and then its body and alcohol content. So if you want to take another sip to evaluate where you think the acidity was, that mouth-watering, biting into a lemon, generally with Riesling and generally with sparkling wines, no matter what the grape is, and generally with cool climates, all three of those generally produce wines with high acidity, and this wine definitely has a high, crisp, mouth-watering acidity. So in the world of sparkling wines, again, if you remember from our sparkling wine tasting series class that we did, brut means dry in the sparkling wine world, but that's actually up to 1.5% residual sugar. So this is I'm going to pause for a moment while we're appreciating this wine and just talk briefly about the International Riesling Foundation sweetness scale. So on a lot of Rieslings you'll see, and actually it's now kind of been adapted to be used on other varietals and or blends of wine. You'll see on the label a little scale that says dry, off dry, medium sweet, or sweet, and it has like a little check arrow of where it falls. That was developed by the International Riesling Foundation, IRF, and generally there's pH that's also a factor in with the acidity and the residual sugar level, but generally sugar, which in the wine world is called Brix, B-R-I-X, if it's under 1% residual sugar, it's considered dry. 1 to 2% is off dry. 2 to 4% is medium sweet. And then anything above 4% is sweet. And you can have wines up to, ice wines can be up to like 15, 20% residual sugar. So the sweet is a wide variety. But back to sparkling wines, brut means dry in the sparkling world, not to be confusing at all. And dry actually means off dry. But anyway, this is a brut classified, but you can have actually, though a normal table wine without bubbles, up to 1% would be considered dry. In the sparkling world, it's up to 1.5. So this is labeled brut, but it actually has 1.3% residual sugar. So again, in the sparkling world, you can have up to 1.5 and still be considered brut or dry. And generally, there is that little bit more residual sugar than you would see in a regular dry table wine, because sparkling wines generally are from cool climates. They have high acidity, and such high bracing acidity generally is balanced out by a little bit of residual sugar. So that is the sugar level. And we're not, you probably, with a little bit of oak contact, aren't really, even though it had a little bit, maybe you're picking up a very minuscule level of tannins, really just adds a textural feel, not really that mouth drying effect. So we're not going to talk about tannins today with our Rieslings, although oaked Rieslings are a thing that winemakers can do and try. So it is possible, but not with the wines we're talking about today. And then, what do you think about the body of this wine? Yep, pretty much I would say light, medium minus body. Remember, when we talk about alcohol, we talk about where you feel a sense of warming. So anything that you don't feel or maybe feel in your nose is generally under 10%, 10 to 12% maybe you feel in your throat. And then if it's more than 12%, 12.5 and up, you generally feel it more in your chest. So this wine, generally, again, cool climate, sparkling wines are right around 12%, maybe 12.5. I would have guessed around 12% for this. And let's take a look on the bottle. It is 12.3% alcohol. All right, so did you like this wine? This is a very food-friendly wine. Again, high acidity wines, Rieslings in general, are very food-friendly. I would argue the most food-friendly wine to pair with, because acidity acts as a conductor of flavors. The high acidity is crisp, refreshing, cleanses your palate, mouth watering, gets you excited for more. In the element of sparkling wines, we have those scrubbing bubbles that cleanse your palate in between every bite. So it's just really great, and so, you know, such great intense aromas and flavors that it really highlights and pairs well a lot of flavors. Riesling in general, I also think, pairs well with a lot of foods that are have lime, cilantro. Again, they cut through fat and cleanse your palate really well. They can stand up to dishes that have a little more acidity because they are high acidity generally. So they're just super food friendly. Because they're generally light in body, I would stick to more your seafood or white meat in terms of body weight, because you don't want to overpower it. But it certainly depends on the other elements. There's so much to wine and food pairing. We could definitely spend a class just talking about elements and guidelines of wine and food pairing. All right, next wine we're going to go to, if there's no questions, is our 2019 Classic Wine Competition's Winery of the Year, which was Wagner Vineyards. It also won Best White Wine out of the almost 900 wines submitted, and that is Wagner Vineyards 2017 Dry Riesling. Wagner does make several different Rieslings, several different levels. Again, back to, you can find dry, semi-dry, or off-dry, medium sweet, sweet, late harvest. They do make an ice wine as well, ice wine of Riesling, so lots to check out. So here is the wine. Let's take a moment to look at it. This is pretty pale straw in my opinion, lighter in color. It's a 2017, as I said, a couple years old. Go ahead and swirl and smell. Remember, it's really important to smell your wine always. 85 to 90% of what we taste is generally from our sense of smell, because our olfactory senses are much stronger than our taste buds. Taste buds really just pick up sour, salty, sweet, bitter, and now they say umami. So a very mineral forward wine, I think, again. Mineral may be an esoteric term a little bit, but you know, that wet rock or limestone. I definitely get a lot of lime in this wine in general. Apple, hint of white flowers. Just imagine you're walking along a stream or a waterfall. That's pretty much what this wine makes me reminisce of. All right, go ahead and taste it. Anybody else have any other comments? Again, that acidity is mouth-watering, crisp, refreshing, high acidity. Rieslings, again, tend to be high acidity just in the natural characteristics of the Riesling grape. Where New York State is pretty much a cool climate across the board. Long Island is a little bit more of a maritime. But this is, Wagner Vineyards is located on Seneca Lake, and so it is in the Finger Lakes. 2017 was a bit cooler and a wetter vintage than 2016. Really a cooler, wetter vintage than most in general. But still, we get a lot of aromatics. So we're not going to talk about tannins. We had high acidity. It was in its name, so sometimes Rieslings say right on the bottle whether they're dry, off dry. And again, this one has that IRF scale I was talking about on it. So it places it for you. This is a dry, and again, dry is anything, according to the IRF scale, under 1% residual sugar, and this one is actually at 0.6. So high acidity, dry, and what would you say the body is? Remember, think of body like milk. It's the weight on your tongue. So skim milk is like light body, 1% medium minus, 2% medium. Whole milk, medium plus body, you know, and then think of cream as that full body texture. So this is pretty light in body. Again, would be super food friendly. Think seafood, think lime, herbs, particularly cilantro, but rosemary, mint even, all go really well. And where would you say the alcohol content is on this wine? Rieslings particularly, Rieslings are grown around the world. They're one of the most popular vinifera varieties, that traditional European species. But they are generally more associated, with a cool climate grape. So its classic old world homes are Mosel, Germany, Rheingau, Germany, which is actually latitude-wise even more northernly than the Finger Lakes. The Atlantic Ocean helps moderate them a little bit more than our Finger Lakes moderate us, but both bodies of water play roles in the regions we're in at higher altitudes. Generally, they have particularly high frequent amounts of petrol in the noses of the Mosel Germanys and Mosel Rieslings and Rieslings from the Rheingau. They typically have a little bit lower alcohol content too. Like those are generally more the 8 to 10%. Another thing that makes them very food friendly. Again, Riesling is grown all over the world. Another old world home is Alsace, France, which though is a part of France, Alsace in the history of the world has been under German control. So they have a lot of German-like winemaking, though typically Alsace has more alcohol. They're more like 12 to 13%. It's a warmer climate than Germany, even though they're so close in proximity. They have a rain shadow effect from the Bosy mountain, and they're generally a warmer climate. So they generally have more alcohol, more body, are more austere in fashion, but still characteristic of the Riesling grape. And Riesling is grown and made in Australia, New Zealand, Washington State in the United States does a lot of Riesling. I mean, it's produced in California and other warmer climates, but it definitely tends to be what we call a cool climate grape. So the Finger Lakes has been doing, New York State in general does really well with Riesling. Some would argue it's the grape of New York State, the varietal of New York State. It certainly does well in the Finger Lakes, Long Island, Hudson Valley, Niagara Escarpment, Lake Erie region. Can't quite be grown up in the Lake Champlain and Thousand Islands. They're actually still a little bit too cool for Riesling. All right, and what did we think overall of this Wagner Vineyards Riesling? Good, yeah, awesome. Again, very food friendly, very crisp, just mouth-watering, delicious, all of these. Well, I love Riesling, so I'm probably a little bit biased. Our last wine, I wanted to do, again, 3 different examples. I do always try to get from various locations around the state too. So this last one we're having is Brotherhood, which is actually America's oldest continuously operating winery in the state, from the Hudson Valley region. This is their 2017 late harvest Riesling. And I chose this wine. It was our 2018 classic best dessert wine. So I wanted to talk a little bit about late harvest and show you a sweeter example of Riesling, because again, it's such a versatile grape made in all sorts of styles. I do want to give a shout out to our 2019 classic competition's best dessert wine, which is Vineyard Views 2017 ice wine Riesling. So if you haven't tried it, maybe get your hands on this bottle. It's also another beautiful wine. And as I said, it was so hard to choose just 3 for this. I mean, it's always hard to choose just 3. So many amazing regions and examples and producers across the state for every virtual wine tasting we do, but it was exceptionally hard for me with Riesling. So if we take a look at this glass, we see, and I'm just going back to compare against my other glasses. This one also has a little bit more color to it than the Wagner, just table dry Riesling. Go ahead and swirl and smell it. So a very sweet smelling. I definitely get like dried apricot is the most forefront. I get remnants of honey and honeysuckle. Golden flowers, definitely a floral note. Sweeter, you know, dried stone fruit, even maybe a little bit of tropical fruits, like more pineapple than apple. So I also, before we want to go on, want to talk a little bit about the difference between late harvest and ice wine. Does anybody know what the difference is? Again, Riesling being such a versatile grape and grown so much in New York State, we see a lot of late harvest and ice wine examples made from Riesling. So late harvest, both I should say, are dessert wines. They would be classified as dessert wines. They're definitely on the sweeter side. And late harvest wines stay on the vine usually a month or 2 past normal harvest. So the longer they stay on the vine, the more sugar accumulation they get. And again, we call that in the wine world Brix, B-R-I-X. I don't know if you remember from a previous virtual wine tasting series, but the basic alcoholic fermentation equation is sugar from the grapes that accumulate plus yeast, whether it be wild or what we add, equals the alcohol content plus heat and carbon dioxide are byproducts. So again, in traditional sparkling, we trap that carbon dioxide in, and that's what produces our bubbles. in table wines, the winemakers let that go into the air, and so they get rid of the bubbles before they bottle. But back to late harvest. So in our fermentation equation, so the more sugar we have, if we let it completely ferment out, doesn't make a sweeter wine, it actually makes a wine with higher alcohol. However, if the winemaker chooses, because they have so much sugar in these grapes, so much bricks in the grapes, to stop fermentation, then that leaves sugar behind. And that's where the term residual sugar for all wines comes from. It's the sugar left behind. Now, in certain regions around the world, that's actually mandated by laws and regulations that to be a sweeter style of wine, the winemaker has to stop the fermentation and leave sugar behind. In the United States, they actually can go like ferment the wines completely dry and then go back and add sugar. You'll never know, they'll never talk about it. But most, winemakers choose to, when making wine traditionally, do the process of stopping the fermentation and leaving residual sugar behind. So these late harvest wines stay on, they get more flavor compounds, they get more sugar content, and so if we stop fermentation, there's that much more sugar to then be left behind. Now, an ice wine actually has to freeze. To be a true ice wine, has to actually freeze on the vines. And so generally in upstate New York, every year it can vary because weather varies so much, but it's generally December or January. They have to freeze at a certain temperature for so many days. And then they are actually, because the water, which is a lot of the actual component of a grape, freezes and gets pressed out, you're left with such intense flavors and aromas and sugar again, even more sugar than a late harvest because we stayed on even longer. And because of that, again, generally winemakers choose to stop, leaving residual sugar behind. Usually ice wines are even sweeter than late harvest wines. And they're more expensive because you lose a lot of grapes as they stay on the vines. You can lose a lot of them during freezing. They generally, well, in both cases, they generally have to be handpicked, so late harvest wines can be generally a little bit more expensive than regular table wines too. But generally ice wines are the most expensive. Both generally are produced in 375 milliliter bottles, which we saw when I showed them up. Both the Brotherhood and the Vineyard View are. But it's a labor of love to make and process them. It takes more time. It's a lot more human involvement than machine in selecting, making sure the grapes don't have rot, making sure birds don't get them, making sure you don't lose them to a bad vintage or a weather, uncontrolled planned weather that stops your ability to make them or have all the grapes picked. And that concentration on ice wine, since you lose so much of the water content, you lose a lot of the actual, the must that turns into wine, so you just have less of your product. So those are all factors that go into the pricing of some of these beautiful dessert wines. So back to, we were smelling apricot, honeysuckle, honey, floral components of this wine. Let's take a sip. So let's talk about the acidity level. Mouth-watering, jaw-tensing. You might think that this one does not have as much acidity or is not high as the other two were because it has so much sugar in it. So when I talk about this in my classes, I often say, think about lemons and lemonade. Not many people bite into lemons, though I do. I love acidity because it's so, crisp, refreshing, so much acidity. When we make lemonade, which a lot of people like and drink, it's not that we lowered the acidity level of the lemons, we just added a bunch of sugar to balance it out. So that's the case often in these dessert wines, definitely a case in this late harvest wine. It's still a high acidity level, but it's balanced out by sweetness. And back to that scale, I said anything above 4 is considered sweet. This is actually 11% residual sugar. And ice wines, as I said, many of them are, 15 and up. So they definitely have a level of sweetness. Not going to talk about tannins. Now, that body, generally Rieslings are lighter in body. However, in the case of dessert wines, when we have all this sugar, that definitely adds weight to the wine and texture. So hopefully you felt that texture. This is definitely, you know, more towards a medium full body. Probably medium plus body. What do you think about the alcohol content? Did you feel as much of that warming sensation with this wine? Did you feel it? Nose, throat, chest? Not at all. Let's see what it's saying. Yeah, so not as much as the other ones. This is actually at, I would guess, I didn't feel a warming sensation, so I would guess that it was under 10%. Let's take a look at the bottle, and it's 9.5%. All right, so make your comments. Any thoughts, comments? What was your favorite? Do you want to go back and compare them at all? Now, when we taste wines, we always taste from dry to sweet. Purposely put them in this order. Granted, I know the sparkling had a little bit more, but you usually start with bubbles unless it's super sweet. And generally you taste from dry to sweet because once you taste something really sweet, you can go back to dry. It can make it taste that much more off or dry because you've had something really sweet. So you generally want to taste from dry to sweet when you can. Any last comments, thoughts on any of these wines? Which was your favorite? Why? What you really liked about them? Again, Riesling across New York State. There are so many amazing examples made. Such a versatile grape, such a food-friendly grape. Speaking of food pairings for dessert wine, so generally you want your wine to be as sweet or sweeter than the food. So while late harvest wine would definitely, could just be dessert by itself, just drink this glass as dessert by itself. But you definitely want to be pairing it with a dessert. I would recommend with a late harvest wine, since it was so fruit forward and floral, I would definitely avoid like chocolate caramel nutty desserts and stick with your fruit forward desserts. So imagine this with like a peach kuchen or apple crisp or, you know, some variation of stone fruit dessert, I think would be really good with this. But keep in mind, you always want your wine to be as sweet or sweeter than the food. So you wouldn't, again, want something super overly chocolate fudge cake or cheesecake would probably be too sweet for this wine. Again, going from eating something really sweet to back to a drier wine, even if it is still a sweet wine, will just make it taste that much more off. So same thing with when you're pairing, you know, I mentioned these are really food-friendly wines and we haven't talked a ton about wine and food pairing. A guideline is always to have your wine be as sweet or sweeter than the food. And so I'm a big proponent of wine and food pairing, but you want to keep in mind that if you're having a dry wine with your food, which a lot of wines are, you know, you don't want to have a dish that has a lot of sweetness. And so if you have a dish that has more sweetness to it or is really spicy or really salty, having a Riesling that's off dry or a varietal in itself that's off dry or even medium sweet might be a better option. Even if you normally prefer dry wines by themselves, you might want to have something with a little sweetness just to balance. Again, remember, think of your wine as just another element to your dish. So when we talk about, you know, acidity, sweetness, fats, proteins, just think of your wine as another element of that beautiful, cohesive, complementary dish for full enjoyment. And Rieslings are really food friendly. I recommend you get, if you're trying to do wine food pairing at home, get like a slew of different Rieslings like we did today, maybe get a couple more in between, and you know, just try with different things. In my wine classes, I always say the only homework assignment I'm going to give is to try, you know, for wine and food pairing, the best thing you can do is try different wines with different dishes every night and decide, you know, what elements. There's really no hard, fast rules in wine and food pairing. It's more like guidelines. And Riesling is really a grape that has its vineyard characteristics. It's generally got high acidity. It generally is light in body unless it's a dessert wine. It's generally very stone fruit, lime, citrus, Pretty fruit forward, sometimes has floral, sometimes definitely usually has a lot of that, again, mineral or limestone, wet rock character to it. But it also, you know, can vary from the region it's grown in, again, cool versus warm versus hot climates versus the soil composition, you know, limestone versus clay. So just one of the many things that makes it's so fun and amazing to try Rieslings from around the world and from different producers. Even just, you'll find many producers in New York State have many Rieslings and on different plots of their vineyard and on different sweetness levels. And it's just fun to try and compare. And then we all know in New York State, we have such different vintages every year because Mother Nature throws such different temperatures and precipitation at us every year. It's always going to, you know, it's going to vary. It's variation. And so it makes it fun to always keep trying and find and appreciate the one that you like best. I know that might change. It probably will change over and over again. So any other last questions or comments on Riesling? Again, a beautiful varietal to appreciate, does super well across New York State in general. Keep trying, and is very food friendly to pair with. Many different examples. There's a Riesling probably for most dishes. But do keep in mind, match the weight of the wine with the weight of the food. So generally they're lighter in body and you'd want to keep it to lighter based proteins. All right, well, thank you for joining me today for our virtual WineVine virtual wine tasting with Riesling. Our next one is slated for October 27th. Stay tuned in the WineVine for more details, or visit our website, or email me. Again, I put my email in the chat box. If you have any additional questions or think of anything later, or any suggestions for a future, let me know. Thanks and have a great day.